Medieval Japan was an amazing country in which great importance was attached to the cult of the sword, or rather, the katana. However, the cult of the sword was not limited to the well-known samurai and ninjas, but went far beyond the boundaries of traditional military relations. One such example would be the Sōhei, the warrior monks who were considered one of the most formidable forces in feudal Japan. Unlike ordinary warriors, the Sōhei were a fanatical and strictly organized structure that enjoyed such authority that they could often go against both the shogunate and the imperial power. In their structure and meaning, the Sōhei warriors were reminiscent of Christian knightly brotherhoods, such as the Templars and Teutons. The history of Sōhei warriors begins in the Heian era at the turn of the 10th century. At that time, all power in Japan belonged to the emperor, who could appoint officials to any government position. In turn, imperial officials had the right to appoint abbots of Buddhist monasteries that belonged to their province. Such dependence on secular and often corrupt leadership found many opponents among the monks. Quite often, some conflicts and protests turned into fights. As a rule, the monks themselves were beaten. But everything changed in 970 when the Inryakuji Monastery, located in Kyoto, decided to create its regular army to defend its interests in conflicts with other temples, bypassing the imperial official. This army most likely consisted of only a couple of hundred people, most of whom were mercenary soldiers. Since the monastic code at that time prohibited the possession of weapons, it quickly turned out that one's army, albeit a very small one, was a serious help in any conflict. The warriors of the Inryakuji Monastery quite successfully suppressed dissent, often burning the monasteries of their opponents. This led to the fact that other temples, to the extent of their capabilities, also began to create their armed structures. Clashes between such temples escalated into small wars with a significant number of deaths on each side. At the same time, the presence of their armies made the temples somewhat independent from imperial officials, who did not have a sufficient number of soldiers to suppress them and were simply afraid to turn to the wayward emperor for help. With the tacit consent of officials, the Japanese provinces plunged into a series of incessant wars between Buddhist monasteries, which by that time had already changed the monastic code and began to train peaceful monks into ruthless and fanatical warriors. The standard equipment of these warriors was the naginata, which was a sword blade attached to the shaft of a spear. Bows or daggers were less common since such weapons were considered treacherous and unworthy of a righteous warrior. But the katana, which was common among samurai, was not used by Sōhei, since most monks came from simple peasant families who did not have the right to carry such weapons. Civil strife between brothers in faith lasted until the 12th century when the Genpei War struck Japan. The Genpei War was one of the largest civil wars in Japanese history. It took place between the two strongest samurai clans, the Taira clan and the Minamoto clan. Buddhist monasteries also could not remain aloof, since their future depended on the outcome of this conflict. Most of the monasteries sided with the Minamoto clan. For the Sōhei warriors, this was their first experience of warfare. The armies of thousands on each side were very different from the old skirmishes between individual monasteries, and the samurai themselves were skilled and well-equipped warriors. However, fanatical devotion to his faith compensated for the Sōhei's shortcomings in combat. In battles, they quite successfully resisted the samurai and made a significant contribution to the victory of the Minamoto clan and the establishment of the first shogunate in Japan. From this time on, the Sengoku period began, marked by the rise of the role of Buddhist temples and Sōhei warriors. However, the peacetime under the rule of the new shogunate turned out to be short. In the mid-15th century, the Yunnan Civil War broke out, the cause of which was a dispute over the throne and inheritance, since the current shogun Ashikaga Yasuhisa did not want to rule, but wanted to engage in art. The main heirs were considered his younger brother Yoshimi and the son of the shogun himself, who was barely born. Each side managed to assemble a powerful army, and Japan, torn apart by a new war, plunged into anarchy. The lack of a unified government led to the flourishing of banditry. Gangs of thugs openly attacked peaceful settlements, and the peasants, as the most vulnerable class, were completely defenseless. The Sōhei warriors also did not stand aside. The largest Buddhist movement, Jodo Shinshu, also rebelled. Hiding behind the principles of equality and justice, it managed to win over many peasants and poor samurai to its side. That is, a united alliance whose warriors were also considered Sōhei. In a short time, several large provinces came under their control, but then the uprising fizzled out. The civil war also ended in nothing. Nominally, the supporters of the younger brother, the current ruler, won. But in reality, this war demonstrated the inability of the shogunate to govern the state, and therefore Japan found itself fragmented between feudal samurai families, Sōhei warriors, and gangs of thugs. At the same time, the first ninja schools appeared, which also controlled significant territories. This division of territories continued for almost a century, until Oda Nobunaga, the great unifier of Japan, appeared on the scene. Nobunaga was a samurai and the head of the Oda clan. He managed to defeat strong opponents and gain favor with weak ones. Every year more and more Japanese provinces came under his control. It so happened that Nobunaga and his entourage considered the Sōhei warriors to be enemies of the samurai, and therefore they were subject to destruction. Perhaps if the Sōhei had stayed away, they could have avoided Nobunaga's wrath. But they were not lucky. They supported the nominal shogun of the Ashikaga clan, hoping for a better future. This was a serious mistake. The shogunate was soon defeated, and Nobunaga took up Sōhei. The main monasteries and fortresses of the monks were burned, and the most impregnable castles were simply starved to death. The Sōhei themselves were killed along with their families, without even trying to take prisoners. And those few warrior monks who managed to survive Nobunaga were destroyed by his successor from the Tokugawa clan. Since then, no other Japanese monastery has tried to return Sōhei. The history of warrior monks has finally come to an end. Thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end. To find out about the latest releases, you just need to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. Also, leave your thoughts in the comments and give it a thumbs up. See you soon.